Of that girl, that child that we used for the slide. This is the reality of so many people.
Yes.
I listened to what the vice president said about the rising cases of poverty in the north, and he mentioned specific states. I don't have those states offhand right now.
It's not just the north, it's the whole country.
Yes, I mean, but
it's the whole country. And remember, before all this happened, we had about 130 million living in multi-dimensional poverty.
So, according to the World Bank now, we have rescued 1 million people over the past how many years? Or more people have fallen?
More would have fallen since this inflation and price hikes.
Or maybe it's actually these developments that pulled some people back
into it.
Anyway, the average price of commodities we understand in our country has increased by almost 50% since May last year. The World Bank released the Nigeria Development Update and says over 129 million Nigerians are currently trapped in poverty. The report was released on Thursday and says inflation is forcing millions of Nigerians into hunger. Well, hopefully we'll have 3 gentlemen join us this morning, but let's begin with Mr. Ifeanyi Peters, who joins us from Abuja studio. He's a governance and development expert. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, and good to be here.
Yeah. You have worked with multilateral organizations such as the World Bank as well. So help us understand the basis or the backstory, if you can, to that data that the World Bank released.
All right, thank you, Ayo, and good morning, viewers. The data that the World Bank released updating our overall macroeconomic status is not surprising in any way, and it has been long in coming. So if you look at the sequence of events over the past years, and how we have managed our resources, essentially. The damning report that World Bank released, which, to be honest, we wouldn't have waited for the World Bank to release such reports. We would have our own statistics bureau constantly updating those reports and making sure that they are available and influence government decision-making process. So the background to all of this is the fact that over the years, governance has become predatory. So we have what I'll call predatory leadership that is absent and completely disconnected from the reality and the people. And it is also extractive in nature, in the sense that what you find is that those with responsibility for managing our common wealth that would have helped to put us in a better pedestal than what you got from the World Bank report, and have led to what I will call incremental poverty, impoverization of Nigerians, would have been avoided if the leadership we have over the past years are becoming more sensitive to the needs and aspiration of Nigerians. So you have a shrinking base on what I'll call the social pyramid, whereby more and more people are falling into the poverty trap. I like the heading for this conversation, which is Trapped in Poverty. And the fact that more and more people are constantly living in excruciating poverty, while a very few are living in opulence to the detriment of Nigerians. So that is the backstory. So behind all of this thing is the decisions we have made over the past couple of years.
Okay. Over the past couple of years.
Have deployed our resources.
Yeah. Over the past couple of years, you said, I think it was in 2022 or thereabout, that Nigeria's NBS, you mentioned the other time, told us that 133 million Nigerians lived in multidimensional poverty. Now we're saying 129 million Nigerians, according to the World Bank, are living below poverty line. They are trapped in poverty. That's the language that is used. Do you see that as any kind of progress from 133 down to 129, or it's up to 129? I don't know. What do you make of that?
So, Ayo and the viewers, it is laughable when we have such numbers. And I will call it tokenism. And maybe a minute shift, if there is any at all, because you have to be sure that that data of maybe about 4 million people or thereabout is actually true. If you look at the indices, multidimensional poverty indicators across Nigeria, coupled with the inflationary trend and the lower purchasing power and other associated problems and challenges Nigerians are grappling with, I'm not sure we have moved the needle at all. If not, it has become worse, in my estimation. And the reality is that you don't need World Bank data. You basically need to move around your neighborhood, depending on where you live, or if you are connected to the poorest of the poor. And you realize that it will probably be worse than 133 million, probably more than that in my estimation, if you get what I mean. So in any case, for me, there's no movement, actually. It is getting worse.
Okay.
That's my take on it.
We've since been joined by a development journalist and the public affairs analyst, Mr. Wale Fatade. Good morning, Mr. Fatade.
Good to see your face again.
Thanks for joining us.
And good morning, how are you?
Morning.
Yes. We are told that about 129 million Nigerians are trapped in poverty. And with events since this administration came into power, has shown that it seems as if people are getting poorer and poorer. So what can people do to raise themselves from this, dare I say, inhuman position in which they live?
Wow. That's a deep question. And I think I'm going to start by answering in what I am doing as a person and as the head of a family in dealing with these tough times. I got a wife who always plants my feet on terra firma, that stop living in the clouds. This is where we are and who we are now. And so there are some items that I love, I enjoy, especially food items, that my wife has been asking that you got to add more money or you chalk this off. And because I don't want to add more money, I agree to them being cut off. And so for food items, people need to look for alternatives. I remember we were taught about plant-based protein and animal-based protein. Surprisingly, animal-based protein is getting more and more expensive. A crate of eggs averagely go for between 5,000, 5,005, 6,000, 6,005, depending on where you get that. So perhaps you might, as sad as it is, you might have to do away with some items on your diet. If a particular kind of milk that I love has gone through the roof, I mean, I've been forced to scale down to another type of milk. We might have to do that. So that's one. Number two, you need to recognize now that not all things are actually compulsory for you. There's some items you can do without. Now, let me give an instance. I was supposed to join you people in the studios today, but I don't have enough petrol for my car. I could not even buy during the week. Every filling station I passed by, there were always long queues there. So I needed to shave my coming to the studio for this kind of a virtual appearance. And so every journey now that is not important, you just have to drop that.
Mr. Faraday?
This sounds like lifestyle adjustments.
Maybe for want of better word now, that's the editorial, that's the title you will give to my story.
Yes,
you must lifestyle adjustment.
Yes, you said one will have to look for alternatives. My question is, are those alternatives any cheaper?
Not in all cases. And you know, that's why I said you put me in a tight spot. Ooh. Because I ask even family members, friends, and relatives now, that those of them with younger children, how do you cope feeding them? Medical science will tell us that the first 5 years of a child are the most important for brain formation. And so if a crate of egg is going for 6,000 in your neighborhood, what alternative does someone have for a young child?
None.
None. And so you are making me not to be too, you put me in a top position in answering that question.
Okay. Well, growing up, you had the option of either custard or pap. I'm sure that,
yes.
you know.
Yes, I remember.
My
mother never allowed custard. She was always for pap.
You know, as funny as this is, it's not even funny at all because, I mean, as a development journalist that you are, looking at some of the comments that have been made by the leaders, and first of all, the fact that, okay, let me ask you this. There are those who have said over time that we had been living a lie before, that we were actually walking on the brink of poverty, on the brink of recession. We actually literally live as a nation on the brink of recession because any small trigger and then we're back in recession. And then the fact that there are so many things that were wrong. The subsidy was a problem, ab initio, subsidy on petrol, subsidy on electricity, and some living large scenarios of quite a number of government agencies that we've been living a lie over time. But now the rubber is meeting the road because Nigeria, as some people say, is broke. I mean, how can you be broke when you have so much money? There are those who also said that the intervention of the NNPCL over time in helping out with the subsidy was also not sustainable. And now we are where we are. Mr. Peters said earlier that, look, all of the things that are happening now were a long time coming. What's your take, Mr. Fatadi?
I think you and I as journalists, we know this. That is just one side of the story. That is not all the sides to that story. The question you ask is, who have been the person making all the decisions, as it were, economically for a country like us in the past years? It's been our government. It's been people in positions of public power, positions of power rather, who have been deciding for us. And so, as a matter of fact, what choices have Nigerians made that led us to where we are now? And when people speak of ostentatious lifestyle, who are those ones that have been living ostentatiously? An average Nigerian is like that gentleman that was choked to death in the US some years back, cannot breathe. Who have been the ones that are getting 14 million naira per month? I'm not sure. I don't know how many Nigerians earn beyond 100,000 or 150,000. We've been dilly-dallying on minimum wage of 70,000 for how many months now? That's another angle. Then the other angle is that, when people speak of subsidies, we should not speak of subsidy in a vacuum. Many countries globally subsidize different things for their citizens. for them to live in harmony and peace. Let's take, for instance, something I'm familiar with. The farming or agricultural industry in America is heavily subsidized. The United States go as far as fighting WTO for their farmers. So why in some European countries they are cutting subsidy for their farmers, the United States of America, and by the way, those who farm in America, they are not up to 5% of their nearly 400 million population, but they are still subsidized. And so when we speak of subsidy, we should not speak of subsidy in a vacuum. And I think a little bit of subsidy, depending on critical areas of a nation, are necessary so that you keep that country going. Even when you look at OPEC countries, those whose oil capacity, production capacity now is higher than Nigeria, they are actually subsidizing their citizens.
But, so, you know, just as you said, you know, we got here because of such interventions. It was in the 70s that the federal government of the day decided, okay, now that we make a lot of money from oil, let's begin to give our people some stuff. And now, as a result of that, there are those who believe that it was because of that exercise, and let me take this to Mr. Peters right quick. It was because of that intervention that began at that time that the federal government, Nigeria, began to take its eye away from its sustenance, which was agriculture. We began to take our face away from what kept us, from what gave us the first TV station, what gave us the groundnut pyramids, the wealth that were in the Southeast at the time. So what's your take on that? Particularly in the light of what Mr. Fatadi said, that look, a little subsidy one way or the other is good. There are those who also said, why not just subsidize production as opposed to subsidizing lifestyles?
Reflecting on our journey so far and how we made that transition from production to consumption. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, good. From when we made that transition from production to consumption because of the oil wealth. So we got trapped in the oil costs, and we were unable to leverage the opportunity of investing wisely in production. As you can imagine, in those same early 70s, of course, there was an ambitious industrialization plan in those early 70s through to the 80s, where you had the plan for the refineries, plan for the steel industries, plans for auto manufacturing, and all of those other grandiose plans that Nigeria has. And they were actually working until we started subsidizing consumption, which is the consumption of petroleum products. Now, there's nothing wrong with subsidy if it is properly managed. But you have to have the infrastructure to manage subsidies properly so that there will be accountability. And the subsidy is targeted at production, like I have said earlier on. So if you start subsidizing importation of fuel, for instance, you are basically throwing away your resources and enriching other countries. But if you have built significant transport infrastructure, you are subsidizing production for agriculture, for instance. You are subsidizing production of certain goods and services that could make Nigeria become more competitive, meet local demands, and sufficient for export, so that you expand your revenue base and income. We will not be in the kind of challenge that we have been in today. So our attempt at responding has been knee-jerk, starting from dashing out money by awarding salaries in the 70s through to subsidizing of petroleum products. And then when the gradual removal of petroleum subsidies started, we started inventing all manner of poverty reduction framework, starting with, of course, prescription from multilateral institutions like IMF and World Bank, that started with the poverty reduction strategy papers that led to to the first austerity measures imposed by the then military government that led to huge devaluation of our naira. Growing up, I used to know that our naira was at par or even higher than the dollar because it has strength because of our production. Gradually, all of that was eroded, and we moved from knee-jerk response by, starting things like National Poverty Eradication Program, NAPEP. From NAPEP, we walked through that to, I think there's one that was implemented, the Presidential Task Force, PTF, which reinvested subsidy money into the system. We also have what you call the subsidy reinvestment scheme. Different government has responded to it, but still, in my estimation, all of these things are tokenism. They are not sustainable.
Well,
there's
one you forgot.
No structural system.
Well, Mr. Peters, there's one you forgot in the 80s into the 90s. Better life for rural dwellers. Please don't even go there right now.
Better life for rural women.
Better life for rural women. Yeah. Well,
thank you, Ayo, for reminding me. Yeah.
Let me come back to Mr. Fatade. 129 million Nigerians, according to the World Bank, living below the poverty line. 133 million Nigerians, according to the National Bureau of Statistics in Nigeria, in 2022, living in multidimensional poverty. What's concerning for me and where the question is coming from is that the host, a good number, a higher percentage of those people are in northern states that have governors that, according to the federal government, now get more allocation from the federation account. Is there something that could have been done or that should be done now to begin to reduce these numbers, particularly from the subnational level? I ask this question because I always say this: the federal government has citizens, and anyone can tell me if I'm wrong. The federal government has citizens. States have indigents and residents. So I'm wondering if you think indeed the state governments have a significant work to do, even though the federal government's policies seem to be biting so hard. We can't just continue to throw our hands up in helplessness, can we?
No, thank you. In as much as we focus attention on our northern brothers and sisters, and rightly so, I dare tell us, some of the things we see in the north today, they are already incubating, and some are already hatched in other parts of Nigeria. For instance, the Southwest used to be the bastion of education. Have you seen our public schools, both primary, secondary, and tertiary institutions? Have you seen under which conditions students are learning? And so let's not, we can rightly focus attention on the north because of the grim data that we get from that place. But some of those conditions are already under our very noses in the southwest of Nigeria. That's one side. Then the other side, this is like that kind of analogy of chicken before the egg chicken. Which one comes first? Citizens have been disempowered. Citizens have been largely disenfranchised. They have largely been under the jackboot of governors and leaders, political leaders in our states, that demanding accountability is an impossibility for them now. So when people have been so pauperized in their thinking, in their way of living, in their ways of living rather, how do they even know what belongs to them, what is their right? And so we must get means of our leaders, public officers now, doing the right thing, making the right decision. Now, look at the fuel tanker accident in Jigawa. I mean, it's extreme poverty that can only push someone close to something that was just a minute or some few minutes away from disaster. And so that's the kind of devilry that people are faced with. And so people are forced to make obedient choices. And so when we ask them to demand accountability from their leaders, do they even know the kind of accountability they should be demanding?
And then how do they demand that accountability, Mr. Fatadi? Because these governors, these chairmen, these legislators, they are insulated, sort of, from the people. You can't reach them anymore.
One of the ways we can do that, and I'm always careful when you blame people for selling their votes. You remember that Yoruba proverb that a well-fried dog is sweet, but before the dog is fried, what do? And so if I'm going to wait for 4 years of pauperization and somebody is offering a token right now, does it not make better sense to somebody like that? Let me just grab whether it's 5,000 or 1,000 naira. And so we need a massive sensitization that people will know that leaders must be accountable. That leaders are not doing us any service beyond what is expected of them when they pay salaries and wages of workers as at when due. When our hospitals are efficiently run, when our schools have enough teachers, when our students are not learning in derelict buildings, when they are not learning. There was one terrible story, whether from our Osun state, about how a group of schools, in fact, in our own dear Ibadan, how when it rains, the teachers and students all do together in just one classroom in Ibadan. So what are we saying? And then there's that other side of citizens now that have been so desensitized to their environment. They have been so desensitized to governance systems that all of us are involved. So if I refuse to blame Anayo Makinde today, who is my friend, because he's in government, so that by the time Wale Fatade is in government, he will not blame me, all of us will bear the brunt, not just in the future, right from the now. And so citizens need to be sensitized, they need to be concerned, and then our other means of organizing ourselves, our resident association, our CDAs, our the cooperative society that we do in our local government, in our local areas, the kind of religious organizations we all belong to, which have been proven over time to be seen as viable instrument of cohesion, they should be strengthened. And so all students, beyond renovating school walls, beyond building school walls or rebuilding, they need to ask accountability from the principal, from the headmasters, from the commissioner for education, that what is happening with our old school. You know, there's this thing, and I'm sure sociologists and psychologists will have different theories to explain this. An average Nigerian, when he's pushed, instead of him to ask, why are you pushing me, he will try to make himself comfortable in that area you are pushing him into. It's part of what has led us to where we are.
Okay. Mr. Peters, let me take you back a bit. When you spoke about we went from consumption to, from production to consumption. It seems to me like we now have to go back to the basics. And you're talking production, and you're talking industries as well. How do you see us getting back to that in a society where nobody wants to go to the farm? Everybody wants a white-collar job, and everybody wants, if possible, to make plenty of money without doing anything or doing much.
Thank you, Alero. That's a very good question, and it speaks to our societal challenges. But those societal challenges are actually the byproduct of the decision of government to push Nigerians into poverty, just like Mr. Fatade said, that if you push Nigerians to a particular point, they'll devise a means to find some comfort within that. It's not true that majority of Nigerians wants white-collar job. No, it's not true. It's also not true that people don't want to farm or be involved in agriculture. It's not true. The reality is that the environment that encourages enterprise and production has largely been eroded. And so for us to make progress, we will need to, first of all, redefine our approach to education. What kind of education are we giving our children? Are we preparing our children to be competitive? That's very key. In a sense that, are we focusing on industry-specific skills that will grow our economy. If you look at most advanced economies, they focus on specific skills that is needed to grow their economy. And so we have several institutions that are basically shaping people to graduate and search for a white-collar job, but not becoming skilled artisans or entrepreneurs that are focused on production. So the focus for government should be to review our current focus on education and the curriculum that we have and make sure that, look, all of these things are taken into consideration by being clear about our direction of travel. Where do we want to be in, say, 30 years? What kind of economy? So there is this grandiose plan of becoming a $1 trillion economy. That's fine. But what are the stepping stones that gets us there?
How?
There must be clarity around that. And there must be almost like razor-sharp focus on achieving those steps and indicators that will lead us to that. Secondly, if moving away from education, we also need to create incentives for medium-scale enterprises to flourish. And how does a medium-scale enterprises flourish when the national grid, the electricity grid is constantly collapsing? There is no access to power. We have severe energy poverty in the country today. So for you to run any production outfit or run any small businesses, you have to basically generate your own power. And right now, fuel have gone over the roof. We're talking, I was listening previously to the last session of the program talking about conversion to compressed natural gas. But to have gas in abundance, we have to also make efforts to produce those cheap fuel that is able to power our economy. And so for years, we've not been able to increase our megawatts. And even if we increase it, we cannot distribute them. So without that, the production we are aiming to achieve will not be achieved. We also need to focus on some strategic industries that we need to promote. Yeah, what are those strategic industries that we need to promote? And then government provide incentives for them, well-managed incentives. I underline that word, well-managed incentives, because what we've seen over the years has been abuse of incentives. Yeah, government has good intention by rolling out incentives to support growth of some aspects of our industries. But the challenge has been the accountability mechanism, this system that makes sure that all of those things are delivered without abuse. So if we strengthen our system to make sure that those things are driven by the desire to deliver, and then also remove every obstacles that lead to the abuse of those incentives. So if you look back, good intention when they started subsidizing fuel, but why should we keep that for such a long time? Why wouldn't we make our local refineries work? Why wouldn't we create a value chain in refinery, for instance, that will see Nigeria as one of the best when you come to refining petroleum products, because we also produce as well. So why don't we do that and have a value chain that is working for us? And that means we are not consuming, we are producing, just using that. In agriculture, people want to go into agriculture, but insecurity is a problem even for rural farmers. And then an archaic agricultural practice is also an issue. That means we need to improve our farming method to make it more attractive to the younger population. Okay. That is something that needs to be. And then outside that, we need to then add value to our products. Okay. There are several efforts. So if you go right now to most shops, you find out that a lot of local processing is happening. But that needs to be ramped up.
Okay, Mr. Peters.
So that we need to
add
try
and get
to all of our products.
We need to try and get as much as possible into this, because we will soon start winding down. So let me just take what you said earlier to Mr. Fatade. Mr. Fatade, it looks like we need to come to the terms that we are in dire straits. Nigeria is broke. Nigeria is, well, Nigeria is not poor, but her citizens are living in poverty. Yeah. So at this point, Mr. Peters spoke about strategic industries earlier. What strategic industries should we be looking at now? And shouldn't our leaders be working out a vision for us? Since we are at the bottom of the pit right now, by so many years' time, we want to be here and here and here. Give us some kind of vision. Where are you taking us? Then we'll begin to talk about how we are going to get there.
Now, you've merged a lot of things together. But the first thing is what the Americans say. When you are in a hole, stop digging. We are still digging further. And we are going deeper into poverty. So, apart from optics alone, our leaders should stop pretending as though we still have more money left. So, they should stop living in affluence. When a jet was smuggled in, that's the right phrase, is it the presidential jet that we still need at this time? How many planes are in the presidential fleet? Can we start by reviewing? And I'm sure many of us, including our listeners, or those who are watching us, have seen they've seen the motorcade of the president, the vice president, the senate president. I had the unfortunate thing of being caught in the Lagos airport one day with the senate president, where I sat in my car. I counted 32 vehicles in that convoy. I was in a state in the southwest. In the convoy of the governor of that state was 54 vehicles. And so we must cut down on that. That's one. Number two, it's obvious that managers will tell us about the SWOT analysis as strength. We can see as today, Nigerians are in the forefront in music, in entertainment, in drama. Can we maximize that more? The state of California, where you have Hollywood, is rated as the largest economy in America. As a matter of fact, if California were to be a country, it's about the 4th or 5th largest economy globally. So it's not because they are, and that is not Silicon Valley in Seattle. They actually have Silicon Valley too. So, so we need to maximize our strength in music, in entertainment, in the arts, as it were. And then our young people are doing fantastically well in IT. And by the way, whichever industry is doing well in Nigeria, it has no government intervention. Every time the government enters the other sector, they run it down. So look at the hub we have in Yaba. Look at the fantastic things our young people are doing in IT. We must maximize that. Good enough that we saw a minister for technology or whatever, and the vice president trying to negotiate 5G or whatever for in Sweden. But at the moment, is that what we actually needed? With our government intervention, those people are doing well. And then the last thing, so for me, those are the two critical areas. Okay. Then the third one is food, agriculture. And I'm happy the other gentleman said that when people saying that go to farm, those who are saying that Nigerians are not going to farm, that means you don't know who the farmers are. I interact with farmers. I do a little bit of farming on a small scale. And I know the major impediment to sustainable farming in Nigeria is security. Across north, the east, the south, the west. And so fix our security.
Essentially, gentlemen, what you are saying is we know what the problem is. We know what the solutions are.
So let's start tackling them.
So let's get on.
So let's just get on with it. And no stories. We know what the problem is. You know what the solution is. Let's get up and do it. And talking about electricity, both of you have talked about electricity. Mr. Peters talked about the national grid. We understand that as about 8:16 this morning, almost all of the discos were reporting 0.00 megawatt.
Oh dear.
So
again,
whether or not that was around the time power was cut in my house.
So whether or not that's a national grid collapse again, I guess the federal government is going to have to come out to tell us. But gentlemen, we have to thank you for your time this morning. Mr. Wale Fatade is a development journalist and public affairs analyst. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
My pleasure.
As well as Ifeanyi Peters, a governance and development expert. We sincerely appreciate your time and your insight today.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So that's 2 down. Next, we want to talk about water, but not the way you like. So we'll be right back.